Delights of a visit to hell. A man once thought, "How I wish I could be master of the option to be dead or alive, so that I might know what it was like to be dead." This idea so dominated his mind that he sought out a dervish and enrolled himself as his pupil. When, after many months, he judged the moment suitable, he said to his teacher, "Reverend sir, I have for years desired one thing, to be able to be alive or dead as I wished. This is because I find it difficult to visualize what it would be like to be in that condition. Would you make it possible for me to achieve it?" The dervish said, "It would not help you at all." "I am sure that all experience is useful," said the man, and he continued to plague the dervish until he agreed. "Very well," said the dervish. "Adopt these special exercises, and you will be able to enter the domain of death and return at your own desire." The man performed his exercises until he had perfected them, and when he felt that he was ready, he threw himself into the condition which is generally considered to be death. He found himself disembodied and waiting at the exit door of life. A subtle form in the shape of a man came up to him and said, "What is your desire?" "As I am now dead," said the man, "I would like to see heaven and hell, so that I may be able to understand the advantages and disadvantages of each." "Certainly," said the angel. "And which would you like to visit first?" "Heaven," said the man. The angel took him to a place where people were walking about, surrounded by every luxury, and dressed in beautiful garments, eating precious fruits. They were all undoubtedly beings of the greatest purity and honesty, but the visitor felt that there was not enough variety in their life for him. He said to his guide, "Please may I now see hell?" "By all means," answered the angel, and took him to another place. Here he saw people revelling and romping, laughing and crying, making and breaking friendships, building houses and destroying them, and living a remarkably similar life to the one which we all know on earth. But hell seemed to have distinct advantages. It was more interesting than heaven, and there were opportunities for personal gain evident to the visitor, which had not yet been observed by the inhabitants, and which far exceeded those open to the people on earth. He said to his guide, "As I am master of the option of living or dying, I think that I will now settle down in hell. Can you arrange it for me?" "Nothing easier," said the angel, "providing that you will change permanently from the status of visitor to that of a resident." The man affirmed that he indeed wished to remain in hell for all time. Then the angel knocked on a door, and two massive demons of frightful aspect appeared. "Take him away," said the angel, "for he has decided to join you." The demons seized the man, and crushing him in gigantic talons, began to bear him off towards a furnace. "Stop!" cried the man, and he appealed to the angel. "If this is hell, what was that place which you showed me, saying that it was hell when it was not?" "That," said the angel, "is not the hell for the permanent residents. It is the one which is shown to visitors." Monks and modesty. A monk, much respected in his community, said to me during a conversation in which he had become animated, "I am among the most modest men in the entire world." He continued, "I defy anyone to find in a lifetime more than 5 or 6 others as humble as me." What is to me awesome about this is not the man's own blindness to what by his own lights was a defect. It is rather the insensitivity of all those people who, when told this story to date, have sought to account for his behaviour by calling him, almost unanimously, an exception. People can live a lifetime without noticing that precisely this tendency may be, in one form or another, manifested and noted in our presence every day. 2 Gurus. There were once 2 gurus. They meditated and lectured, studied the lives and sayings of the ancient mystics who taught that man could control his outer life in order to attain release from the bondage of events and escape from the tyranny of the environment. One of the gurus knew the properties of secret herbs and had contemplated in the hermitages of the Himalayas. He had made pilgrimages and darshan visits to the abodes of Mahatmas great and small. He had attended the gatherings and rituals of the forests and the temples, and he was thoroughly versed in the mysteries of the sacred mantrams. The other guru, who lived at some distance from the first, had for many years instructed disciples. He had himself been a chela of several masters of high repute. He was familiar with the scriptures and the ancient classics inscribed on leaves, and he had measured his length along the ground in spiritual journeys to countless monasteries. He had practiced posture training and mandala gazing, and had eaten the berries of the hermit and worn the robe of the sannyasi, and by many who knew him, and many who did not. One day, the second guru was visited by the first, who said to him, "I have a young and recent disciple who wishes to attain moksha. I have sat with him and chanted over him. I have also breathed on him and recited holy words, but he still seems very restless. I have exposed him to silence and to vocational exercises. We have meditated together and rung bells. The beads are never still in our fingers, and we have kissed holy relics. What would you advise me to do with him now?" The second guru asked, "Have you had him on a bed of nails?" "No," said the first guru. "Very well, then. Try that." A few days later, the first guru returned and said, "It is with reluctance that I trouble you again, but I am in need of advice for my troublesome disciple. Is he still restless, even after lying on a spiked bed?" "I regret to say that he is." "Very well, then," said the second guru. "I now advise a course of concentration upon secret inner sounds, hot and cold baths, and an application of holy oils and certain ancient breathing exercises." The first guru went away, only to appear after a few more days to report that all was not well with his chela. "He seems to lack resolution, and the course of holy efforts is not visibly taking effect. We must resort to even more advanced methods," said the second guru, "and this is what you shall now do." He described a regime of special gyrations and calisthenics, the application of charms, a period of silence, special robes, and several other secret and initiatory techniques and procedures. 3 days later, the second guru was sitting with his customary serenity at the entrance to his ashram when the first guru again arrived. "I suppose that you have come for further guidance for your disciple?" asked the second guru benignly. "No," said the first guru. "That is not now necessary, since the man is dead." "Dead? When did he die, and how?" "He died suddenly, in front of me, this morning. He just went limp and collapsed. When I raised his head, I saw that all life had departed from him." "But did he say nothing before he died?" "Hardly anything. Just before he fell to the ground, he had started a sentence with the words, 'When am I going to get some food?'" Desserts. People buy my books, and sometimes take the trouble to write to me about them. Sometimes they send copies to be autographed. None has ever enclosed postage, so it costs me as much to post back their copy as I earn from it. Today, I have had a request for an autograph from someone who asks me to refund his postage. Do authors get the readers they deserve? Overweight. "This man is too heavy," said the doctor who had been called in to see a patient in the Land of Fools, "and his ailment will undoubtedly become worse unless something is done about it." He went home, leaving his knowledge and expecting some action to be taken. When he returned to see the patient, he was met by sorrowing relatives. "Doctor," they said, "the man was sicker than we knew. Even after his weight had been reduced, he died." Perhaps he did not get his weight down fast enough. "No, it couldn't have been that. We decided that the best way to take off weight was to cut his head off. We had that done in 5 minutes. Banal. Banality is like boredom. Bored people are boring people. People who think that things are banal are themselves banal. Interesting people can find something interesting in all things. Milk. A man who had come to visit me said of someone who had just left the house after a gathering, "That man came in here looking exactly like someone who was trying to find a pint of milk." I asked him what made him so certain. "Because," he said, "I used to be a milkman, and I should know that look." Criticizing. Who is the wrong person to criticize? You. Crudity. 2 people can illustrate crudity to you. The first is the crude man, whom you see perceiving the diamond as a stone. The other is the refined man, who makes clear to you the crudity of the first one. Secrets. A real secret is something which only one person knows. Games. Denial and affirmation are games which people play. There are people who deny that they are capable of denying, and who would insist that people do not insist. Understanding. People are always trying to understand. There is only one way to do that. It is to discover why you want to understand. Thinking point. What makes you like me? Overheard at a party. What does it matter whether we like one another or not? Surely it is the deeper things in life which really count. The talisman. Once upon a time, a man picked up a talisman. On one side was undecipherable writing, on the other the inscription, "Talisman for transforming stones and gold." He took the talisman to a place which was covered with stones, and said in the approved formula for such operations, "Talisman, do your work." In the twinkling of an eye, the talisman had turned into a stone. Hope. It is not, "Have I got a chance?" It is more often, "Have I seen my chance?" Enemies. Enemies are often former or potential friends who have been denied or think that they have been denied something. Teaching. Teach honesty by all means. You do know what it is, don't you? Perfection. Because there is a word for perfection, people will always imagine that they know it. Hatred. If you want to strengthen an enemy and make him exult, hate him. The reason. A man from the Land of Fools wanted to pull down the clouds. "Why?" someone asked him. "To squeeze out the rain." Aphorisms. Few things are more absurd than wise saws originally designed to inculcate or maintain the social needs of a society long past, when they are applied to today. Stimulus. A pungent thought is a corrective to deterioration of the thinking, like cold water helping slack muscles to work again. If you dislike the thought more than the sting of a Shah which stimulates, and you do not feel its regenerating power, prepare for your mental obesity to possess you completely. It won't be long now. Belief and knowledge. Knowledge is something which you can use. Belief is something which uses you. Shade. Have you noticed how many people who walk in the shade curse the sun? Handcrafted. A spiritually minded lady more than once observed that I looked far too young to be a guru. Some years of dealing with her kind has solved that problem. Her objection now, I hear, is that I do not act like a guru. For one with such a mind, she seems slow to draw the obvious inference. People don't always get the gurus they deserve, they usually get the ones that they manufacture. And why shouldn't they? Nobody else would have them. Childhood. Once upon a time, there were some discontented children. Since their thinking capacity was not very adult, they decided that they would become happier if they changed their clothes. Some of them started to wear one kind of dress, others dressed up all differently. Then some thought that their boredom and anxiety was due to obeying certain rules, so they changed them. Finding that this was no good, some of them started to invent one set of rules after another and tried to observe them, each time convincing themselves that this particular set of rules would do the trick. There was all kinds of variations on this. They tried team spirit, then they tried leaders, then they decided that leaders were the trouble, so they decided all to be leaders, to exorcise this evil. That was not much more successful. Then they decided that certain inequalities were at the root of their difficulties, so they split into parties according to which set of inequalities was believed to be the most important. If they didn't like one set of rules, they inverted it and did the reverse, for they were practicing sympathetic magic, like primitive people, though their name for it was rational analysis. They are still at it, and seem likely to continue in this way for some time to come. At least, that is, until someone calls them in off the playground for tea. Opinions. Do not ask people how they arrived at their opinions if you want the truth. By asking them, you will only be entering into a game. They will only tell you what they think is true, or what they think you want to hear. Study, rather, what they say and how they say it, what they do, and what influences have played upon them in the past. This is how you will find out, if it is necessary for you, how they have arrived at their opinions. Defying experience. Every day, man defies his everyday experiences. He seeks simple answers for simple questions. There is no simple answer to a simple question when the question was defective, like, what makes that car travel? The answer, petrol, is as true, untrue, and incomplete, and probably useless, as the answer, the driver, the sparking plugs, the wheels, the transmission, and so on. But the questions still come. What am I? What are you doing? What should a person do? Waiting. There are a lot of people who cannot stand the tension of waiting. These are the ones who have two alternatives. Either to stand the tension of waiting, or to be harmed by it. Golden rule. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Traditional philosophy has so deteriorated over the centuries that people have come to regard this trick statement as a piece of advice. It was originally intended to make people think. They were expected to react by asking why it should be a good policy, considering that most people want the wrong things for themselves. Shortcuts. There are indeed shortcuts to higher knowledge. Those to whom the idea of a shortcut appeals are the least likely to be able to use them. This is because these tend to be the people in whom the factor of greed is so strong that it screens off the capacity to benefit from the shortcut. A straight line is not the shortest journey between 2 points if the distant point is so screened that you may see it but not reach it. A man who arrives at the door of a house before anyone else may feel self-satisfied, not knowing that he has forgotten to bring the key. What the culture transmits. It is the stupidity and shallowness of some of our forebears which punishes us just as much as the endowment of the wiser ones offers us opportunities. The rejection by the stupid of valuable materials in the past caused an impairment in traditional expressions and terminology. When this happens, the culture becomes unable to communicate experiences because it has no means of doing so, no patterns, and a mutilated language. Thought stabilizes itself lopsidedly, like an organism which has compensated for the loss of one of its parts. Colorblind people cannot see colors. Time, place, manner. Forget the fables of ritualized thought so that you can remember. The right thing said at the right time in the right way will almost never be the popular thing at the popular time in the conventionalized way. Much knowledge is ignored, discarded, or opposed because it is not apparently from an expected source, projected in a desired fashion, presented in a comfortable or modishly uncomfortable manner. Out of context. People often quote things out of their original setting or context. Context in English means woven together. Much wool is found woven together with cotton, but the coexistence of wool and cotton does not necessarily illuminate the meaning of either. It is undesirable to quote anything out of its right setting or context. It is equally undesirable, though very common, for things to be studied in an old context, which was, from the first, unsuitable for them. Tolerance. Tolerance, and trying to understand others, until recently a luxury, has today become a necessity. This is because, unless we can realize that we and others are generally behaving as we do because of inculcated biases over which we have no control, while we imagine that they are our own opinions, we might do something which would bring about the destruction of all of us. Then we will not have any time at all to learn whether tolerance is a good or a bad thing. Shins and arms. Why does a dog sink its teeth into your shin and not into your arm? Because, as an observer can see, the shin is within his reach, the arm is not. This, however, would not prevent the dog from imagining that the shin is a more vital part than the arm. No opinion is more tenaciously held than one in the mind of a person who has no real option to hold any other. Yet opinions are generally substitutes for what opinions purport to be. Have a care. If a Manx cat tells you that it is trying to preserve its long, beautiful tail, you don't have to believe it, especially if you have eyes. Certainty. What can you do with a person who says that he is absolutely uncertain about everything, and that he is absolutely certain about that? Opportunity. People forget that when an opportunity is accepted, it is not what they may think it is. A man recognizes and accepts an opportunity in accordance with the degree of man he is, and whether it is a corresponding opportunity. Ends. You are adrift while you still think that a means is an end. Society. You say that this society will come to an end because societies always have done so. I wonder whether they have ended because they were not really societies at all. Fame and effort. Effort makes some great men famous. Even greater effort enables other great men to remain unknown. Prejudice. People cannot handle prejudice because they try to deal with the symptom. Prejudice is the symptom, wrong assumptions are the cause. Prejudice is the daughter of assumption. Dropout. We hear a lot about dropouts. So much, in fact, that the people who talk about them have effectively attained their objective: to prevent us having the time to ask what it was that such people were ever in. Straws and camels. Talking about straws and camels' backs is just one way of approaching things. If you have enough camels, no backs need be broken. Optimist and pessimist. Sometimes a pessimist is only an optimist with extra information. Talent. Talent is the presence of ability and absence of understanding about the source and operation of knowledge. Unrecorded history. A philosopher of ancient times, after he'd been dead for centuries, accidentally discovered that his teachings were being misrepresented by his living successors. Because he was still a dedicated and sincere individual, he managed to transport himself back to ordinary life for a limited space of time. When he eventually reached the earth of the humans, however, most of the people could not believe that it was him at all. But when he had convinced some people that he had really returned, some said, "Your being able to come back here is far more interesting than your ideas. Don't you see that?" So he made no progress with them, and had considerable difficulty in escaping their attentions. The people who realized that he really was himself said, "Do you not understand that the most important thing is not what you said or did, but what we believe you said or did? You, after all, are a transient here. We are continuous." Did you? Did you ever hear of the man who heard of a certain buried treasure? It was in a country where a foreign language was spoken. It was to be given to someone who exactly answered his description. A friendly and well-intentioned man offered to teach him the Chinese language before he set off. He had spent so much time in learning the language that he thought he'd better invest in a horse to get him to the hoard before he was too old to enjoy it. When he got there, however, he found that Chinese was not the language spoken in that country, and when he did find the spot and could communicate with the people about the treasure, they said, "You can certainly have the treasure, but for one small point upon which you have unfortunately not informed yourself. The man who buried it specifically excluded from its future possession anyone who rides a horse." The first ape and the bananas. There was once an ape who discovered, in conversation, that there were such things as bananas. This information stimulated his innate affinity for bananas. For years he dreamt of the day when he would eat one. In the fullness of time, a bunch of bananas came his way. Eating them was a sublime experience, as marvellous as he had imagined that it would be. But from that day on, he was unhappy. He decided that he would never again have the chance of such a stimulus, anticipation, and fulfilment as now lay behind him. Because of this belief, the ape became impossible to live with. Eventually, he lay down and died. The second ape, and the bananas. There was an ape who wanted a banana more than he wanted anything else. When he eventually got one, its taste fulfilled his highest expectations. Next time he was offered one, however, it did not seem to taste at all good. In fact, his original experience of banana eating had been compounded of 9/10 anticipation and 1/10 banana. When he tasted the banana this time, therefore, he spat it out, saying, "That is not what I call a banana. Someone is evidently trying to deceive me." He passed most of the rest of his life trying to find the right kind of banana. Ultimately, he decided that his first banana had been unique, so he gave up the search. Death. A man once said, "Death? That's something I'll believe in when I have some evidence for it." He went to a mountain top to contemplate, and refused to see or to listen to any living creature, since his investigations into death were of the greatest importance to him. That was thousands of years ago. Since nobody has ever heard of him again, know whether he is still alive or not. Even history has forgotten about him, which goes to show how ungrateful humanity is toward its heroic investigators. Evolution. In a certain forest, the monkeys used to throw sticks to make fruit fall from the trees. But just as they had at one time acquired this art, they were quite able to develop beyond this stage. One morning, a certain monkey saw that a spider had spun a web, and could get to his food by scurrying across it. "That is an advanced way of doing things," said the primate to himself. So he asked the spider how to do it. When there was no reply, he killed the insect with an impatient blow. Then he described the idea to his companions. They spent an enormously long time trying out various webs fashioned from creepers, of bark, even of saliva. Schools of thought and chattering institutes of study based on the feasibility of this technique grew up. But then a whole afternoon had almost worn to an end, and the monkeys were hungry again. It would soon be dark. One by one, they wandered off in search of suitable sticks to throw up at the laden trees. Grit. "What you are pleased to call a mere piece of grit," said the oyster, "is in reality nothing nearly so simple. It is a socio-psychological problem of ever-shifting emphasis and real relevance to contemporary circumstances. To speak of it in terms of a process is to try to mock the entire intellectual and academic heritage of oysterdom. No oyster could have any patience with you." Worried. A mosquito was buzzing around the ear of a tiger. The tiger, from time to time, shook his head or raised a paw towards his ear. Another insect, flying past, watched for a moment. Then he said to the mosquito, "You will never survive if you go near enough to taste any of the tiger's blood." "I do not intend to try," said the mosquito. "But I have made him worried, have I not?" Truth. From time to time, ponder whether you are unconsciously saying, "Truth is what I happen to be thinking at this moment." Common knowledge. The more you look at common knowledge, the more you realize that it is more likely to be common than it is to be knowledge. No real knowledge is common. 2 religions. I asked a venerable authority, "What would you call these beliefs? Man was born to suffer, for he has to suffer to be born again." He said, "This is Christianity, without a doubt." Then I asked another equally hoary pundit the same question. His answer was, "That statement summarizes the spiritual philosophy of Hinduism." Life is difficult, isn't it? Expectation. If, from time to time, you give up expectation, you will be able to perceive what it is you are getting. Giving and taking. If you give what can be taken, you are not really giving. Take what you are given, not what you want to be given. Take what is given. Give what cannot be taken. Life and disappointment. Seeing an old lady of evident serenity and knowledge sitting opposite me on a train, I leant forward and asked her, "What wisdom can you pass on to me?" She said, "Young man, all I have got to say is that life has been a great disappointment to me." Tantalizing. People wonder why, as they put it, Eastern teachings tantalize. It is generally because once we can see that people have become tantalized, they are not yet ready for true understanding. How can you be tantalized by something which is not in itself appetizing if you are not yourself greedy? What did you learn? Please, not again what you studied, how long you spent at it, how many books you wrote, what people thought of you, but what did you learn? Rights. A man jealous of his own rights often manifests this covertly working for himself by fighting for the rights of others. The weakness of such a situation is that people have still not realized that rights based on any jealousy are not worth having. People and ideas. The devil said to the scholar, "Why do you not make yourself master of an entire field of learning, so that people can be guided by you out of total ignorance into comparative knowledge?" The scholar said, "I like the idea, but not the person who suggested it." "That is good enough for me," said the devil, "for people easily forget the person as soon as they can make use of an idea." For extraterrestrial beings. When the human being says, "It is not true," he may mean, "I don't know about it, so I think it is untrue," or "I don't like it." Decisions. People who cannot make decisions are in that state because they have made a decision not to make decisions. They are indecisive because they have been too decisive in the first place. The consequence of precipitate decisiveness must be inactivated if the condition of uncertainty is to be overcome. Big and small. The only drawback about being too big for small things is that it makes one too small for big ones. Too big for information is equal to too small for knowledge. Too big to learn means too small to understand. When anyone says, "I am beyond that," you may be sure that it is beyond him. Not because it must be beyond him, but because if he were beyond it, he would not say it. Wetter water. We all know people who want water to be wetter. They need to realize that water is there to be of the wetness of water. To agree with such people's first assumptions is hypocrisy or ignorance. To try to wetten water for them is stupidity. Tourism. A tourist is a person who goes to a place which was originally worth visiting. He is undoubtedly endowed with supernatural powers, because, after sufficient exposure to the tourist, the inhabitants start to hate the place. Toys. People used to play with toys. Now, the toys play with them. Remembering and forgetting. You have not forgotten to remember. You have remembered to forget. But people can forget to forget. That is just as important as remembering to remember, and generally more practical. Advanced. What is sometimes thought to be clever is, significantly often, merely an advanced form of foolishness. Shrinkage. Water shrinks wool, urgency shrinks time. Shrinkage may be an advantage or the reverse, according to expectation. Against God. How curious that people should be more interested in the charge that I am against God than in the question whether God is against me. The Emperor's new clothes. It is not always a question of the Emperor having no clothes on. Sometimes it is that an Emperor at all? Digestion. Instead of giving one a religious tract, people interested in that kind of thing ought to make sure first that the recipient has a digestive tract, to be able to absorb the real content of spiritual materials. Versatile thought. While you use thoughts which attract or repulse you only for purposes of stimulation, you are only half alive. You are also cooperating in keeping yourself in good training to be conditioned by others. What do you think I am? The stupidest man I ever met had a favourite saying. It was, "What do you think I am, stupid or something?" Laziness. The laziness of adolescence is a rehearsal for the incapacity of old age. The seeking of the master. Musa Najib was asked why he charged a fee from those who came to his sessions, and why he often did not even address his audience. He said, "I charge for this object lesson. People believe that knowledge must be given freely, and consequently mistake everything which is free for knowledge. I do not always lecture because, among Sufis, the master finds the pupil. The pupil has to be physically present, but he may be absent in every other sense. When I discern that a pupil is present, then I find him, for then his inner call is audible to me, even if it is silent to him. Seek, and you will be found."